Hi there, we're Christine and Marina, and today we're going to talk about the Canada Convoy protest. We have a little overview for you first, then we're going to talk about the traditional media reporting. We're going to talk about the treatment of the press during the protests. Then we're going to talk about social media, the government and the media in general, and then we're going to have a conclusion for you guys. So let's start with what is the Convoy protest. Most of you probably know it as the Freedom Convoy. It took place between January and February in 2022. And it was initially a protest against the trucker vaccine mandate that they put into place, where every trucker who was crossing the border between America and Canada needed to be vaccinated in order to do that. Interestingly enough, 85 till 90% of the truckers were already vaccinated, but the few that weren't decided to go to Ottawa and protest against it. Within like a few days, the whole trucker industry and the labor groups already distanced themselves from the convoy because it turned into way more than what it initially was supposed to be. It turned into this big protest against all COVID restrictions there have ever been and there could ever be. And it was supposed to be lots of trucks coming from all over Canada and just meeting in front of the Parliament in Ottawa. So that is what happened, but then there was hundreds and thousands of other people who just joined them too. They also blocked the border crossings close to Ottawa, and it just caused a lot of trouble with the whole moving goods between the countries and everything. It all ended with Justin Trudeau invoking the Emergency Act to get the police involved, to just tow all the trucks away and just dismantle the whole camp that was there. That was after 3 weeks of them being there. So obviously the whole thing was all the news everywhere, no matter where. TV, even the internet, not just the traditional, also the new medias. It was everywhere. Every newspaper had it every day. There was something new coming up. And in Canada, all of those things were usually very negative. As you can see here, Trudeau and his family were removed from his residence for security concerns, and then the police was on high alert for possible violence. It was all just, they were all described as angry. And then their behavior was already questionable from the beginning before they even got to Ottawa. And it was all just negative. They're bad. They're causing trouble everywhere. And the Toronto Sun puts it very nicely. The media handling of the trucker convoy was very one-sided. And the summary the lady gave here, or the guy, gave you was "Run for your lives, the barbarians are at the gates," which pretty much sums up every single media report about the trucker convoy. While that was all happening in Canada, the international press was also very interested in, but they were reporting more about like why this is happening, what exactly is happening. It was all very non-biased, just informative, informing their people about what's happening. France even was talking about how family calmly marched in front of the parliament, how young people were chanting and just people banging pots and pans, just normal things you do when you're protesting. That all changed once the protests spread around the world, and other countries like New Zealand, Australia, and France had their own convoy protests. That's when they started talking about how disruptive it is for people, and how most of the people living in the area are actually frightened by the people. And then all the other negative things Canada was talking about, now all the other countries were talking about too. So the only country who really liked the convoy protest was Russia. As you can see here, they spent around 4.5 hours reporting on the convoy because they got a chance to show how the people in a democratic country in the Western world are not happy with what the leader and the government is doing there. So they obviously had a field trip about this. So how did we get here? How did the press just talk so badly about the protesters? Well, that's mostly their own fault. The protesters were really angry with the media from the beginning. They said they were hyping up the whole COVID thing. They're not reporting on how dangerous the vaccine is. And they just blamed the media for making this into a big deal and basically causing them to not be able to work. And that ended with the media not being allowed to go to the press conference, which is kind of not a press conference if there is no press there. But yeah, they were a few of them were not allowed. Some were allowed, but they were only allowed to ask like a total of 2 questions in the entire press conference. So not much of a press freedom thing there. And just in general, the journalists, as you can see here, they were harassed online, offline. They were given security guards by their company, by whoever they were sent by, just to give them, to keep them safe from the protesters. They had to disguise themselves not to be noticed or recognized as a newspaper reporter. And they just kept on being provoked, spat in, and like threatened. And the people that they did interview, the ones that were civilians, they begged them to not give their names and everything, just to keep them anonymous so that they are not getting more death threats already. And just in general, as you can see here, not all the protesters, but most of the protesters said that the reporters did deserve abuse. So reporters weren't safe, and technically civilians weren't safe either. So all the media and the public had left was people of the public who were doing civilian journalism and reported about things they saw and how they see it by themselves. And they did that via social media, which is what Marina's going to talk about now.
Hi, I am Marina, and now I'm going to talk about the social media during the Canada Convoy. So, social media was used as a tool during the Canada Convoy, not only to share what is happening by the participants' point of view, but also it played a major role during the protest because it was a tool used to organize the protest itself. Everything started with the Facebook group Canada Unity. It was a group created by people that already had a huge presence online that started to share their concerns about the new COVID policies, especially about the mandatory vaccination. And it caught the attention of many people that was unhappy with the government at the time. So they start to organize the kind of convoy as a protest to the mandatory vaccines. And they were sharing in the page what was happening during the manifestation. But from the beginning, it was also a tool to like fundraise, organize, and make the convoy happen. So we can see in the pages many posts about what is happening during the convoy, but also posts showing that people were not satisfied, not only with the mandatory COVID vaccines, but also the government in general. Most of the people didn't like Trudeau's policy and blamed the government from what everything was happening at the time in the country. So it became like bigger than a protest about COVID itself. And during the convoy, it was also used as a tool to report what is happening by the participants' point of view, because many of the people did not trust the traditional media because they didn't believe that traditional media was really reporting correctly what is happening, because to their point of view, it was a huge manifestation and it has a really good point of view, and it was really trying to change policies in Canada. So we still can see a lot of people that share at the time the manifestation, and people that believe in the convoy that was also supporting, not by being there, but sharing content on social media. So we had many posts about people supporting the convoy and posts of people reporting what was happening. And till now, the groups are very active. People will still believe that they made a huge protest and they was fighting not only for the mandatory vaccination, but also for freedom in general and for fighting for a new government in Canada. And this post is very interesting because people that supported the convoy at the time believe that was like the biggest success they had it in Canada, even though they didn't change anything, any policy was changed, and the impact they made on policies, it wasn't that big. So talking about the government involvement, the government, when talking about media, the government did not interfere at any social media platform or any traditional media network. Freedom of speech is something that is very valued in Canada, so the government did not try to control any source of media. But what the government did at the time was invoke the Emergency Act, something that was never been done in Canada before. But since the manifestation got really bigger, it happened in Ottawa, but it became something bigger than a provincial issue. So the government had to invoke the Emergency Act to have power over the policies, the policial officers, and the military to try to stop the manifestation because it got like a really big one for the country. Never happened. They never had like this big manifestation before, so they need to like set it down since it was becoming an issue and people's life in the city. So even though the manifestation didn't change anything, because at the time 85% of the population was already vaccinated, the pandemic was almost over, and even though the country had changed their policies from for cross borders to have or not mandatory vaccines, the U.S. borders were still closed at the time, so they couldn't go to the truckers couldn't go to Canada anyways because it was happening both sides. So if only Canada changed, it wouldn't affect anything. Even though nothing really changed, it was voted New Story of the Year through the impact it had. And it started as an online manifestation, people sharing their concerns online, but actually become a really real like in-person issue. So we brought the attention from the government, they brought the attention for the traditional media, not only in Canada but all over the world. So it became the story of the year. But the really analyze we can get from this manifestation is how the non-regulatory media can really impact the real life, because in social media platforms we don't have regulations, so people can share what they want. They were sharing not only their personal concerns but a lot of misinformation and fake news, and it made a really big impact. Like it made a really big manifestation and really becoming to something big. So the thing we need to like look for it after this event is the impact internet and social media can have and social life itself. So thank you so much, and this was our presentation.